Hello and welcome to round 13. I'm Tim Willoughby here with Hall of Famer Randy Buehler, and there's a lot of talent down in the feature match area. Let's go and see exactly what they got for us. Hello and welcome to round 13 here of Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. The Eldrazi, they've well and truly invaded this modern Pro Tour, and we're going to see some more of them in our feature match area right now. Our first player in our video match is Ivan Floch from Slovakia. There we can see him. He's playing with face-to-face, and he's on the Eldrazi deck, very similar to the ones that Channel Fireball have got going on. There's Chalice of the Voids. There's a lot of very, very quick monsters being played out.
Face-to-face really sort of expanded their geographic borders. For a team that used to be like the Canadian guys, they've got Thiago Saporito, they've got even Floch now.
But he's up against a stiff challenge there. He is up against that man there, Hall of Famer William Jensen, playing Infect. This is the second Pro Tour that he's played Infect for, very familiar with the deck. And it's another one that's super explosive.
This is the deck that most of Pantheon ran at the last Modern PT, where they had Tom Ross testing with them. And it is Tom's list initially. They're running it back. They couldn't find anything better, which makes sense. It's a very good deck.
Well, it looks like Floch had the memo on what he was going to be playing against. He kept a hand that, in the dark, is perhaps not too exciting. Just the two creatures in there after his turn one. But one of them's a Spellskite, and Spellskite super impactful in this matchup against Infect. 2 copies in Ivan Floch's list, and in some respects, for game one, they might be the 2 most important spells in his deck.
Yeah, you make a great point. 2 Spellskites. Some of the CFB lists only have 1 main, and you're right that at this point in the tournament, these guys know exactly what the other big teams are running. Interestingly, the Pantheon Infect list main decks answers to the Spellskite. There's a couple copies of Twisted Image floating around.
Yeah, kill target Spellskite, draw a card. Certainly not too shabby. And here we see Thought-Knot getting a look at William Jensen's hand.
Only 5 cards. This was a mull to 5 for Huey.
It's a rough one. 2 copies of Become Immense, a Glistener Elf, Rancor, and Apostle's Blessing. Crucially, though, nowhere in the mix does William Jensen have any colored mana.
Right.
This a big deal for the Hall of Famer there.
I think at 5 with a Blink with a Nexus
and a Git Probe,
you probably do have to keep that draw. Yeah, Gitaxian Probe too. You're right.
So there goes the 1 Infect creature from William Jensen's hand. So many different pieces of the puzzle he needs to find. Draws the forest. But he is facing a pretty hefty set of attackers from Ivan Floch. Just gets in for a single point of Infect and passes things back.
You're looking at the numbers for day 2. This Eldrazi deck did have a great advancement percentage. I mean, over 80% of the players running it got to day 2, which is the best of the the top dozen decks. Anything that had more than 5 copies in the field. But the Infect deck was also very good. It was at like 78%, if I remember correctly.
So there's Spellskite. That one of the key pieces of disruption Ivan Floch has available to him in game 1. Chalice the Void, not the worst against Infect either. A lot of their biggest threats are costing just a single mana. And actually, William Jensen says, I'm so far behind. I've seen a Spellskite. I've got nothing going on. A little smile from him there as he shuffles up for game 2. And we're going to get a chance to see some more magic from this feature match area very, very soon. But first, these messages.
Ultra Pro is the place to go for all of your Magic accessories. With card sleeves, deck boxes, playmats, and portfolios showing off the best Magic art, Ultra Pro is the standard in safe storage. Visit ultrapro.com for more information. Put your game to the test at a Grand Prix. These open tournaments feature the best players in your region as well as top Magic pros from around the world. Upcoming Grand Prix include Houston, Melbourne, Bologna, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and Paris. Visit magic.wizards.com/Grand Prix for a complete schedule.
Hello and welcome back to round 13 of Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. While our players in our main match are shuffling up for game 2, doing a bit of sideboarding, we're going to get a chance for a look in on one of our other matches, this one being the King of the Hill table. On the left of our screen, that's Frank Lepore. He's playing one build of the Eldrazi Menace. On the other side, Andrew Brown with a very different build. On the left is blue-black Eldrazi. So this, going a little bit wider, it's got more going on in terms of Blight Herders, more exile effects.
Yeah, for me, Wasteland Strangler is the key card in the deck. This is Frank Lepore's version. This is definitely a third distinct strain of Eldrazi. It very much looks like the evolution of the decks that were starting to show up on Magic Online a month ago. And Frank tested on Magic Online. It was him, it was Melissa DeTora, and it was Magic Online for their testing. I know she put in a lot of work. He put in a ton of work. And here he sits. If he wins this match, I'm going to call it. He's in the top 8. Mathematically, he could hypothetically lose the last 3 and have his tiebreakers collapse, but that tiebreaker collapse never happens to the guy who's in first place at this point in the tournament. So pretty much a winning in to the top 8 for Frank Lepore.
Of course, Andrew Brown playing one of, like, if there's a success story of this Pro Tour, it's Eldrazi. If there's a success story within the Eldrazi, it's this red-blue version that just put up the most absurd numbers I think I've heard of almost any deck played at a Pro Tour on day
95% match win percentage.
It's hard to beat that. There's only one match that you can do to do better on that. And we see Drower of Hope is a card that's in both of these lists, but it's only in play for one of these players. And even though Andrew Brown on 6 life, he's going to be able to shut down the attack step pretty happily. And that Vile Aggregate up top attacking for a lot of damage here.
Yeah, Frank's version definitely a little more control-ish, right? Relic, Scrabbling Craws. It's trying to do the process and, you know, get cards exiled, bring them back. He's got value in Matter Reshaper. Does also, of course, have Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher because they're Thought-Knot Seer and Reality Smasher.
And one of the cool things about both of these lists is that they get to run Cavern of Souls as a land that taps for colorless mana, a land that fixes their mana for their colored Eldrazi. It's just sort of a very safe one, and perhaps one of the reasons that we've not seen so many control decks doing well at these top tables.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you make a good point.
So
CFB list doesn't run Cavern, of course, because it has no colored spells. Which is still just bizarre to me. I'm not going to count Simian Spirit Guide or Dismember. I refuse.
Reality Smasher trading off with the Drowner of Hope, but then immediate follow-up of Blight Herder with enough cards in exile to be able to create 3 Eldrazi Scions along with the 4/5 itself. We have a fairly busy board here. One thing of note for both of these decks is that they are virtually mono-permanents. In terms of spells, for the deck on the right-hand side of our screen, there are 3 copies of Dismember Main. I believe that Frank Lepore does not have any instants or sorceries in his main deck.
It's a true story.
Once we get to the sideboard, potentially you might see a Surgical Extraction, a Warping Whale, maybe a Spatial Contortion somewhere in there. But basically, what you see is what you get. What's on the board is what they've got going on. At least in terms of commentary, that makes our life fairly straightforward. But equally, it makes things fairly straightforward for each of these players in terms of working out what to play around at any given moment. Reality Smasher, the play there.
A pair of 5/5s.
With Trample. The Trample pretty relevant in this matchup, where sort of Scions normally perfectly fine blockers, but here they're kind of just speed bumps. And Frank Lepore on 11 life needs to give pause for thought here, as he's not the one that's able to easily jump over the top with his attacks in the way that Andrew Brown is.
Block like that. All right, first, second, third. Damage. Take 5. 6 ingest.
The ingest taking an Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth. Not too much of a worry in terms of mana needed. There's a Relic of Progenesis off the top. Will ensure that any processing that Frank Lepore wants to do able to be achieved relatively easily. A couple of updates from our back tables. It looks like Bartolomej Lewandowski is still having just a fantastic Pro Tour, defeating Matej Zadelka in Game 1. And Andrew Cuneo with his Infect deck, a game up against Mike Sigrist.
The one of World Breaker has come down for Frank Lepore.
Yeah, Worldbreaker card that we've seen in some of these Eldrazi lists, and certainly it has a bigger impact when it does come into play.
It is big, and it kills things. I mean, the 5/7 stats line up pretty good against attacking 5/5s.
This is very much true. Interestingly, while it's straightforward enough to cast the first time, there's a limit to how many lands you want to throw away with this deck. Frank Lepore wearing a Sultai pin. His deck just barely Sultai, but it does count. We're not far left on this game, so we're going to hold our main match just for a minute or two, just so we can get a sense of where this game's going. And
wow, Eldrazi Obligator.
That an absolutely huge play. One of the big differences between these Eldrazi
Steal
decks,
your
and a
World
huge
Breaker?
swing coming from Andrew Brown here. What can Frank Lepore do? He's looking at those cards in hand. They're not going to be any help right now, Frank. What you've got is 2 Eldrazi Scions, 1 Wasteland Strangler.
Wow. Does he survive this combat? I mean, that's just like, is it even possible to survive? No, it's not.
So Andrew Brown picking up the first game. We're going to be able to jump back. We haven't missed any of Floch and Jensen just yet. It looks like they're just still shuffling up, and they will start just as soon as they are ready. Now,
did I hear a Cuneo result come through as well?
Yeah, Andrew Cuneo won his first game against Mike Sigrist. So Infect versus Eldrazi there. The Infect deck able to get the quick draw that it needed. Thinking about
that's funny. So both of these matchups are Pantheon Infect versus CFB / face-to-face Eldrazi.
And one of the cool things about being on a team, of course, I'm sure that it's not just sort of evening debriefs at the end of each day where the team talks about what they've learned. After every single round, once you get a bit of a feel for what a particular team is playing, they'll be talking about matchups, they'll be talking about key cards that they need to be considering for future games, because we still got 3 more rounds of constructed before our top 8, and in many respects, those 3 rounds the most important of all, especially for the likes of.
Is that 5 cards
William
again
Jensen.
for William Jensen? It is. A Shrugs and a Keep. Scry to the bottom. Hope the Gataxian Probe does something.
Well, he's got lots of information, and he sees that there are a few more spells going on after game 1. 2 copies of Dismember in hand for Floch alongside Reality Smasher, Matter Reshaper, and Endless One. The good news for William Jensen here is the only lands in Ivan Floch's hand are Mutavault. Now, Mutavault, obviously a very good land, but it only taps for 1 mana. And it seems crazy to say it, but Floch only having lands that tap for 1 mana, kind of a big deal in this matchup, because there's plenty that seem like they tap for more.
Yeah, the other thing going on here, Jensen got paired up. So he's eliminated from top 8 contention if he picks up this loss. I mean, maybe there's a tiebreaker scenario where he sneaks in. And, of course, he can still get a nice pile of pro points. But this is a pretty bad loss for Huey. Yeah. 2 mulls to 5 with top 8 on the line. And meanwhile, Ivan Floch is basically in 2nd place at 10-2.
Yeah, he's drawing like a boss as well. Found Eldrazi Temple off the top. This is 2nd Matty Reshaper in a row, and that enough for a handshake from William Jensen. Never really in this match, just drawing horrible starting hands for each of his rounds, which means that Ivan Floch, a little smile on his face. Basically, he knows that he picked up kind of a free win there, that he didn't really need to do much than just the basics with his deck.
Oh, yeah. You're not happy when you see a Hall of Famer on the other side of the pairing board. You go up, I got to play Huey. Probably going to be a feature match, but 2 mulls to 5 makes that an easy round. Let's get some time to get something to drink, relax, figure out what he's going to do for these last 3 rounds.
Now, we've seen a lot of Eldrazi in the feature match area. I think it's likely we'll be seeing plenty more Eldrazi going forward. We're going to jump across to something a little bit different here. We have Bart Lewandowski of Poland. He's up against Matej Zalkai. This just the 3rd Pro Tour that Bart's been to, but he's doing great guns at this one. He's on Abzan Company, and he's up against Death's Shadow aggro on the other side of things. So even though the life totals currently in Bart's favor, do not count out Matej Zalkai. His deck one that can really leverage a low life total, unlike any that's ever really existed in Magic before.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. This deck is unique in Magic's history. You actively want to deal damage to yourself.
So we have Wildnicatl and Tarmogoyf for Matej Zalkai here. Up against that card there, you see it, Anafenza Kintree Spirit. It plays very, very nicely with Kitchen Finks and potentially a sacrifice outlet like a Viscera Seer to gain an awful lot of life. Very good against these aggro decks. In the meantime, though, Fiend Hunter is going to be able to deal with one of those creatures in play.
Fiend
Bye-bye,
Hunter.
Tarmogoyf. Not one that I was expecting to see this weekend, Fiend Hunter.
No, this deck has a lot in common with the old Birthing Pod decks, right? You've got the whole, Viscera Seer combo with persist creatures. Anafenza plays the same role Malira does in that loop. No Birthing Pod, but 3 chords, 4 Collected Company. You can stitch things together, and then the rest of the deck is this sort of value creature deck. It can beat down, not particularly quickly, but every creature you're playing is usually a 2-for-1 of some flavor.
And if every creature's a 2-for-1, that means Collected Company largely a 4-for-1.
There you go.
And when you get that kind of card advantage, you don't need to work too hard to find a way of winning games. So Matej Zalkai here, looking at his hand and seeing an awful lot of copies of Dismember, not too much else going on.
Yeah, this seems like a terrible matchup for Death Shadow. How are you getting through on the ground? Like, the reign of the pod decks, like, you couldn't beat that with an aggro deck. Like, you couldn't play Zoo in that meta. And now here, this is a very similar sort of a matchup.
Something that I will say for Death Shadow aggro, it can be hugely explosive. It's got the Become Immense Teamer Battle Rage combo.
That's fair. You have to go over the top with the combo. That makes sense.
It can also run, I'm not sure if this build runs Apostle's Blessing, but certainly some of them have done historically. You can set up the one big swing, and when you look at Death Shadow itself, even without Become Immense, sometimes Teamer Battle Rage is enough.
Yeah, Trample seems like the required ingredient.
So Wildnicatl there trading with Anafenza.
Matej sitting on Dismember. Get my guy back from under the Fiend Hunter.
Yeah, Matej not too worried about taking one here. Well, we have a new King of the Hill, Frank Lepore. We said that he was going for a virtual lock on top 8.
Yep.
He's got a little bit more work to do. Andrew Brown now a King of the Hill with the red-blue Eldrazi. Also worth noting that Mike Sigrist has squared things up against Andrew Cuneo. That will be going to a Game 3. In the meantime, we do have Dismember, meaning that Tarmogoyf getting to get stuck in here.
It's interesting. I thought that blue-red Eldrazi might line up really well against the other Eldrazi. The Obligator in particular just seems crazy. Like, steal your giant guy and attack. That's... Well, East-West Bowl may have, they're one of the Eldrazi decks that's succeeding, but if they're the Eldrazi deck that can also win the mirror, that's good news for them for the rest of today into tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it works out that some of the disruption that the other Eldrazi decks are running, so the likes of Relic of Progenitus or Chalice of the Void, don't actually fare too well in the mirror. So
Correct.
The fact that the red-blue deck isn't running them means it's just got more business spells.
Yeah, and it seems like you should be weaker versus the rest of the field, but they haven't been struggling so far.
As it is here, though, life total's low on both sides, and when that's the case, the Death Shadow aggro deck probably in a pretty good spot. Matej Zalkai unafraid to attack him with his Tarmogoyf. It's likely to be fairly big, looking at the length of this game's been going on.
Is that Eidolon of Rhetoric for Bart Lewandowski? It's kind of hilarious in this matchup. So many cantrips in Matej's deck that let him cycle through.
I mean, the big worry, I guess, is any time that you attack into an Abzan Company deck that's got 4 mana untapped, there is the potential that the namesake card comes down, and that would be a problem, but dodge that bullet. Eidolon of Rhetoric goes to the graveyard, which Matej Zalkai will not be sad about. He likes casting lots of spells.
It probably did have to chump block there.
And here's a Collected Company done before Matej Zalkai gets a chance to attack. I mean, I believe that Sin Collector is one of the options that might get hit, so I can see how he might want to just grab something out of Zalkai's hand. As it is, he finds Kitchen Finks and Viscera Seer, 2/3 of his big combo that will completely end the game. I mean, if nothing else, the life gaining off that Kitchen Finks a very big deal in this matchup. Just to let you know, we are holding the last game between Mike Sigrist and Andrew Cuneo. One of the benefits that we have of all of these fast decks in the feature match area, we've got a little bit of time that we can sometimes hold back matches, bring you more magic here from the Pro Tour.
Mate's still holding a Dismember, by the way. His second Dismember. It's got to feel pretty good in his hand right here as Bart is so close to stitching the combo together.
And actually, if he doesn't want to, Mate can choose to cast it for its full retail cost without losing any life if he is a little concerned about his own life total. Patience, thy name is Zalkai, though. At the moment, just holding on to it, knowing that it's ready for if the big combo comes. Calling the draw for Bart.
Bart Lewandowski has everything. He just has to hope Mate doesn't have an answer.
Well, now that Kitchen Finks has a persist counter on it, he doesn't quite have the full combo because if that Kitchen Finks dies, it's just dead. He would need the Anafenza to come down and then another creature to put a counter on the Kitchen Finks first to get rid of the -1/-1 counter. So there's a few extra hoops for Bart to jump through, but he has almost everything that he needs.
Why did he block with Kitchen Finks if that's true?
And I guess that from Bart's side of things, he knows that there's some explosiveness that can come from the Death Shadow aggro deck, and Teemo Battle Rage certainly a
Oh, he may know about
danger.
the Dismember. That's probably what it is.
Court of Calling forcing the issue here. Mate Zalkai having a think before it resolves, ultimately says, you go right ahead. Casting it with X equals a 3, that means that Bart Lewandowski almost certainly to be able to find any of the creatures in his deck. One reasonable option is just the value play of finding Eternal Witness. Let's see what he chooses.
Liliana, Heretical Healer.
Definitely an interesting option. He has the ability to flip Liliana Heretical Healer as and when he so chooses, simply by sacrificing a creature with his Viscera Seer. And this is another way of getting counters off your Kitchen Finks and gaining some life, because once Liliana flips, you have the potential to put a creature back into play from your graveyard with one of Liliana's abilities. In the meantime, you get your 2/2 black zombie token and other good things happening.
Mate trying to decide if he needs to dismember Liliana before she flips. Trigger on the stack.
And presumably, if he does dismember, Bart has the option of sacrificing his Viscera Seer to trigger Liliana again.
Nice. You're right. Mate sees it too. He's not happy. He's like, but this card should do something. At least he does. He decides he wants to force Lewandowski to also sack the Seer.
Pays full retail for his Dismember. A little wary of his life total.
You have a scry on the stack still, yes. And this,
So I'll respond to that sacrificing Viscera Seer, so I get the trigger from Liliana.
Sharp play here from Bart Lewandowski.
Now I get the scry from Viscera Seer.
Have to exiles the card he sees. Leaves it on top.
And
Seems like a pretty solid one here.
Yeah.
the scry from Kitchen Finks, and that's also staying on top.
must be a good card.
It is.
I would say Zalkai has successfully divined something at the top of Lewandowski's deck. So the next choice for Bart, what he's going to do with that Liliana now that she has flipped.
Right.
Like to -3 Liliana, bringing back Kitchen Finks, gaining to like 13, and you might like.
End of turn.
A surprisingly convoluted set of hoops to jump through to ultimately end up with your Kitchen Finks without a counter and a zombie rather than a Viscera Seer.
Well, he managed to work his way through the Dismember.
Yeah,
I mean, if it wasn't for the Dismember, Bart was in quite good shape.
absolutely.
He was, you know, again, 2/3 of the way through the combo with a couple of scries to go digging. The Dismember did, you know, Matei successfully fended off crazy shenanigans. That said, I mean, Matei's ahead on board right now with that Tarmogoyf. We know, though, that Bart Lewandowski has a path to exile on top of his deck, so he's either going to take a hit or he's going to chump with a zombie. Then the Tarmogoyf is gone, and we kind of play on in top deck mode.
It feels to me like Bart Lewandowski has a deck that top decks a little bit better than Matei's
Right,
Alkais.
right. Yeah, no, I was thinking, like, with that Cord, oh, is he supposed to just go for the combo, you know, take some damage and Cord? That plan would have gotten destroyed by the Dismember. The way Bart played it, yeah, he's just going to go ahead and cast the path. The way Bart played it, he sort of got value at every step along the chain, and even if Matei had an answer, he was still going to be, you know, +6 life from where he was before, and he's up a zombie. And
Now, one thing worth noting, I just saw as Big Z was going to shuffle his deck there, a card that he has in after sideboarding is Pyroclasm. And that potentially huge in this matchup, able to break down some of the things that Bart Lewandowski trying to build up here. And conveniently triggering prowess such that all those Monastery Swift Spears may just be completely fine. One of the Swift Spears trading for a zombie, the other one just sort of throwing its ore in there.
yeah, and Bart has very much played this not as a combo deck, but as a value deck this game.
And that was always one of the strong things about the assorted decks of this stripe that have been thrown around in Modern over the years. There is the ability to play fair, and this is probably the fairest deck we've seen in the feature match area in general, which seems like a crazy thing to say when you consider that it can gain infinite life.
Wow, was that Become Immense off the top? I mean, Matei is down to 3. That Kitchen Finks is potentially lethal, but... Okay, Inquisition sees that it's just a stomping ground. Can't quite kill from 12, though, so he's obliged to play defense with that Monastery Swift Spear.
Yeah, the defensive Become Immense, not a happy
Not
place
a
to
good
be.
sign.
And you could see it on Matei's Alkai's face here, that he knows that he's going to have to draw very well from here if he's going to pull this out. I mean, if he draws a Death Shadow, it's huge.
He can now even take a Kitchen Finks hit. He can hold it off with Wild Nacatl. Oh, boy.
Danger, Will Robinson. Here comes another Collected Company. The top 6 cards, any 2 creatures with a mana cost 3 or less. And we know that Bart Lewandowski's deck is stocked full of powerful cards here. There's a Sin Collector already, a Burrenson Forge Tender, potentially a nice choice.
This one for sure, but I'm not finished. Okay. Good for you.
The first one was an easy choice, that being a second Kitchen Finks.
One that's big enough to brawl with a Nacatl. Yeah, he's got Sin Collector, Forge Tender. Are those the choices, or is there another choice in there? I think it's just those 2.
Those are the 2 that he's choosing between, certainly.
And I think he knows that Sin Collector is going to miss.
Yeah,
What
I mean, there's-
spell would Matei be holding, right? It's almost certainly a land.
yeah, like, I guess maybe a Dismember would be the only thing that he would hold up. There's another Inquisition. Sees another basic Plains. No reason to hold that Plains in hand once it's been seen, really, here. Matei forced to
No choice.
pseudo trade with a Kitchen Finks. And with
Wow.
the poll already up a game, that is the match. Bart Lewandowski going to 10-3. Absolutely fantastic performance from him. And we were finished in our feature match area. A good array of different ways of being aggressive in this format. And this modern format, you'd be hard-pushed to say it's not a very aggressive one. We saw Van Floch kind of going through the motions with his Eldrazi deck, but the most interesting match for me, in a way, was the Eldrazi mirror that we saw and the variations on the Eldrazi list, how they ultimately impact on things going on there. But one more game to go. We're going to jump down and see it. Mike Sigrist with his Eldrazi against Andrew Cunio's Infect. Let's kick things off there and see whether or not Andrew Cunio can bounce back, having dropped the last game to Mike Sigrist.
Yeah, we just saw Matei Zadokai's top 8 dreams probably die with that usually fatal 4th loss. One of these guys will suffer the same fate. Both are Platinum Pros.
And it's the tough feeling of they've had a little bit of a wait, so they've just sort of...
Yeah, they've been looking at these hands for a while, waiting for us to get there.
And Andrew Cuneo, he is on a 6. Both these players checking out what's going on, and the tough spot, we saw it for William Huey Jensen.
Boy.
It's the same deal. Andrew
He had
Cuneo,
to keep no green mana.
Oh.
Off the top. Well, he got the scry, so he probably knew it was there.
Yeah, he knew it was there, and he's been able to sort of sit back comfortable in the notion that he's going to have that going on. And presumably, again, pretty happy not to see anything bigger in terms of mana from Mike Sigrist on turn 1. But Mike Sigrist, he's got a Ratchet Bomb, which is potentially going to be pretty reasonable here. He's got a Chalice of the Void as well. And those two together, both powerful against what the Infect deck's looking to put together. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. And there's Chalice for 1, so potentially quite a few of the spells in Andrew Cuneo's deck.
How about 3 of the 4 in his hand? Nell blank.
Yeah, going in the old-fashioned way. Each of those creatures getting in for 1 point of poison. So 1/5 of the way there, just with good old-fashioned attacks. Pump spells-wise, drawing a little thin.
Well, Del, to be fair, the 4th spell in Andrew's hand, so he's Glistener Elf, Noble Hierarch, Might of Volcrosa, not happening. However, Become Immense, very live and very relevant.
It may be that at some point we see Andrew Cuneo playing spells into the Chalice of the Void to get countered, simply to build his graveyard for that.
It's not crazy.
In the meantime, though, Mike Sigrist smashing in with Reality Smasher, 5 points of damage coming through. That plus some damage from lands for Andrew Cuneo means that he's on a fairly short clock here.
Indeed.
Just 12 life to work with.
Wow, he drew another Giant Growth. He has Groundswell and Might of Volcrosa in his hand. That would be great here, except that they're terrible.
So we did see Noble Hierarch just played straight into Chalice of the Void.
Yeah, he's got to build up the Delve spells for Become Immense, and I think Mike Sigrist knows exactly what that was.
Yeah.
Hasn't actually seen Andrew's hand, but knows part of it.
More lands that tap for more mana. A big endless one potentially coming here. The Ivugin tapping for 1 mana, making Eldrazi cost 2 less. So huge amount of mana here. We see Mike Sigrist doing a little bit of counting up. Is that another Reality Smasher in his hand as well?
I think I saw an Endless one. Yes, both are there. Reality Smasher and Endless one.
Super smashing great. Here comes 10 damage coming straight through. Andrew Cuneo on 2. The time that they had to wait for this game to start may have been longer than the amount of time this game takes to play out. And there's Endless One. Not even tapping any lands in order to make a 2/2.
That's already enough to be lethal.
And it also means that you've got Blinkmoth Nexus back to block with if you're really that worried. Admittedly only blocking Inkmoth Nexus, but better safe than sorry. There's the handshake. Mike Sigrist picking up the win. He goes to 10 and 3. And another straightforward one for the Eldrazi.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it looked like a Reality Smasher game, but it feels like to me like it was a Chalice of the Void game.
I mean, it would be very real to suggest that it was a no lands game for the Infect deck again.
Yeah, they were just doing the decompression there. If Cuneo had drawn a fetch land on that final turn, fetch, puts a card in the graveyard, and makes a mana, I think he could actually have become immense for the win.
Terrifying stuff. The explosiveness of some of these decks in Modern, an absolute terror for anyone that's looking to survive through to turn 4. But big deal for the Eldrazi. Great times for them in the feature match area.
Yeah, they won both the matchups against Infect.
Yeah, and what I'm really interested to see is, will it work out that the Eldrazi deck that's best positioned for the mirror is the best as we approach our top 8? Or is there still room for someone to topple one or other of the Eldrazi decks that is worse against the field, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, the field, yes. Yeah, 3 different flavors of Eldrazi in the top 8 there. We saw Infect looking bad, but I feel like that was just, those were also bad draws.
Yeah.
I don't think that deck is outclassed by the Eldrazi.
Absolutely. We've learned that bad draws are bad. We have not necessarily learned that the Infect deck is such.
Well said.
There is plenty of time for us to find out that, because we have 3 more rounds, and those 3 rounds very, very important for these players as they wend their way towards the top 8. So just to summarise those results, Ivan Floch winning over William Jensen, Andrew Brown over Frank Lepore, Bart Lewandowski with the Collected Company deck showing that there are other ways of winning in this format. And finally, we have Mike Sigrist's Eldrazi taking down Andrew Cuneo with Infect.
So we had multiple players set themselves up for win-ins, right? If you assume that anyone getting to 12 wins at this point will then be able to draw in, that means Ivan Floch is playing for that Magic 12th win next round. So is, Frank Lepore is still playing for it. Andrew Brown is now playing for it as well. So we're starting to close in on some top 8 competitors at this point.
Our feature match area, it's been exciting all weekend. It's not going to get any less exciting from this point onwards. We really hope that you're able to stay with us for these last stretches here. I know that depending on where you are in the world, it may be getting on a little bit late, but this Magic is electric. I'm sure it's going to be enough to keep all of us up to see exactly how this thing play out at Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch. Anything that you're really hoping to see in these last few rounds?
How many Eldrazi decks are going to be in the top 8? That's the question. Coming into the weekend, it was like, is nobody actually going to figure out how to build it? We've got 3 different versions sitting in the feature match area with 3-4 rounds to go in the tournament. At this point, it's just what's the over/under on Eye of Ugins in the top 8?
Yeah. Eye of Ugin, the one card that I'm super safe, is definitely in the list.
Right.
There's a lot of variation
all
between
three
them, though.
they overlap. Well, yes, but they all have Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple. They all have Mimics and Reality Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers. That feels like the core that every version of it has. It's just a question of where do you go from there.
Exciting
I think they all
stuff.
have Endless One as well.
Yeah, we have time to find that out, though, and find it out we will. Stay tuned. We're going to head things over to the desk now where you get to find out everything else that's been going on here at Pro Tour of the Gatewatch. But here from round 13, from myself, Tim Willoughby, and Randy Bueller, we're going to be saying bye-bye for now.
Heroic work from Tim and Randy there. 2 rounds of Modern gone, 3 rounds still to come. So let's check you in with some of the scores on the doors. Luis Scott Vargas still has a loss to give. He's at 11-2. If he can win his next round, that could be right on the verge of him not sitting at this desk on Sunday, but instead sitting in that feature match area on Sunday. We'd all love to see him there. We know a lot of you would too. That means that Jason Chung, he's had his 3 losses now, 10-3. Of course, he's been right at the top of the leaderboard, so if he can get to 12-4, he's one of the prime candidates to make it in at that point. He can still win his last 3 and end up 13-3 and safely in. Owen Turtenwald is 10-3. To get there, he had to virtually eliminate Paulo Vida Dama de Rosa of Brazil, falls to 9-4. Sam Tharmaratan of Canada, he's at 9-4, and that means that Kentaro Yamamoto, someone we've not talked a lot about so far, is up to 10-3 and in the mix. If he can string together 2 wins, he may be able to shake hands in the last round. Mike Sigrist, you've seen win. Bart Lewandowski, you've seen win at 10-3. But guess what? He's not the only Polish player still alive for top 8 here, because his compatriot Gregor Kowalski is up to 10-3 as well. Great job by him. 2 Austrians have been in the mix, Emanuel Gershenson and Oliver Polat-Rotman. Polat-Rotman is now up to 10-3. And then Andrew Brown, the Grand Prix Denver champion from last year. He's back for his 4th Pro Tour, and boy is he making it count. 11-2. Co-leading the field, along with Frank Lepore at 11-2, Luis Scott Vargas 11-2. Things are getting very, very tasty at the top of the standings. Now, somewhere out there, I imagine there are people still playing. And if there are, that means Brian David Marshall's out amongst them. Brian David Marshall, what's going on?
Rich, what is a poor Splinter player to do once they ban your favorite card, Splinter Twin? I can tell you right now, I'm watching a match between Pro Tour Hall of Famer and champion Jelger Wiegersma. He's playing against Grand Prix Pittsburgh champion Alex Bianchi, both of them known for their love of Splinter Twin. Both of them playing blue, white, red control in this tournament, playing each other. They're locked in a match. Wall of Omens are in play. Snapcaster Mages are in play. Jelger Wiegersma is beating down with a Restoration Angel. He just cast Crumble to Dust on a Wandering Fumarole. It's game 3. I don't know how it's going to play out. It might be going for a little while here. This is Brian David Marshall telling you what's going on here on the floor.
To BDM, I've been joined by Ian Duke from Inside R&D. And Ian, we're going to take a moment, because you very much wear 2 hats at the Pro Tour. Mm-hmm. You're in the booth analysing every turn of every game, but you're also here gathering data and information and feedback from the players with your day job in R&D.
Absolutely.
Now, for those of you who don't know, you should just explain, you're what we call a final designer for the most part?
Yeah. We sometimes call it our development team as well, but basically we're in charge of the second half of a set's design. So our design team, initial design team sort of comes up with a vision for the set. What are the mechanics going to be about? What stories are we trying to tell with the set? That sort of thing. And then eventually hands off to final design, where we sort of iterate on the set, polish it, develop the cards for constructed, think about the limited environment, all those sorts of things.
All right. Now, I think anyone who's watched our Inside R&D videos over the years understands that R&D has a kind of, I guess, maybe a diminishing focus on constructed formats the further back they go. So standard is really front and center for you when it comes to constructed. And so that means that modern, with its cards from all the way back to 2004, by definition, a little bit less so. So I want to ask you about two flavors of Eldrazi that we're seeing here in action this weekend.
Sure.
Well, first off, the big powerhouse stuff, where we've got Thought Not Seer, we've got Reality Smasher and so on. To what extent is that a surprise to you, that that's kind of pace setting here at the Pro Tour?
It's a surprise, but not a surprise. So the story sort of goes back to before we were starting Battle for Zendikar, talking about the initial design for that set and what it was going to be all about. And we knew we were going to have lots of Eldrazi, and we knew in order to make limited work and sort of, we couldn't have only big Eldrazi, right? We were going to have some lower down on the curve, some blue and black Eldrazi costing like 2U and 1B and so forth. And so at that point, our development team sat down and said, hey, we know we've got these super powerful lands in Modern, in Eldrazi Temple and Eye of Ugin. Are these going to be a problem if we have a block that's full of Eldrazi at all different sizes, not just big ones, but small ones as well? And at that time, we kind of talked things through, and we said, hey, we want to do what's right for the block. We want to do what's right for standard and for limited for Battle for Zendikar. So we know those lands are out there, and we know that that's going to amp up the power level of the Eldrazi in Modern, but we're willing to sort of take that risk in some sense that, we're just going to make the cards as they should be for limited and standard. And if they get super powered in Modern, so be it. Maybe it creates a new Modern deck. Maybe they're not good enough for Modern. Maybe they're a little too good for Modern. I don't know. We're not exactly going to be sure. But we're willing to sort of sign ourselves up for that and find out. So,
right. And what is certainly true is that 30 odd decks ended up as Eldrazi, but those were in basically two pretty small testing enclaves. It wasn't like of the RPTQers who perhaps didn't have a big team behind them. There weren't a lot of Eldrazi decks there, so it's not as if everyone got off their Affinity deck, got off their Burn deck, got off their Infect deck, and went, it's clearly Eldrazi. So even if we're seeing Eldrazi being really good here, it's not as if that was clear coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we heard rumors of the Eldrazi deck sort of toward the end of the BFZ life cycle. It started showing up a little bit in Modern, and obviously Oath of the Gatewatch added a lot of powerful new tools to that. So coming to this Pro Tour, there's a lot of question marks. How good is the Eldrazi deck going to be? Talked to various players. Some teams tested it. They're like, this deck is great. Other teams were like, we don't really think it's good enough. We think it's a worse version of mid-range decks or a worse version of Tron in some cases. So there was a lot of disagreement about how good the deck is. Certainly based on the results so far today, it looks like it's a player in the format. And in general, I think that's super cool. It's not every day that a new set comes out and adds so much to Modern and actually adds sort of an entire new archetype, or in this case, maybe multiple archetypes worth of decks. So I think that's super cool.
Because that's certainly where I want to go for sort of part two of this. Because, we can look at Thought Not Seer, as I say, and Reality Smasher and go, okay, that makes sense. But Eldrazi Skyspawner, Vile Aggregate, Drowner of Hope, these are cards that, you're happy to open in sealed, that you look to draft in triple BFZ, and suddenly we're just seeing them all over the place in Modern. Now, I'm going to guess that is more of a surprise.
That's definitely more of a surprise. Even up until the day before this tournament, I wasn't necessarily expecting to see Vile Aggregate and Eldrazi Skyspawner in Modern. So that's definitely super cool, and it really speaks to just the synergies in Modern. When you combine 50 different sets, I think we were saying, right? 50 different sets worth of cards, you just find these unexpected synergies that just shoots the power level up to higher than the cards would be, individually combined.
Guess what? Magic's amazing, and you can turn a card from almost anywhere into almost anything if it all just aligns up right. Well, what's aligned up right now is Deck Tech time, and one of the hottest men in Magic right now, 4 Grand Prix titles from 8 Grand Prix top 8s, the winner of Mexico City last week. Here's Brian David Marshall with Fabrizio Anteri.